Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, with plenty of news around the Colorado Rockies. First day, first full squad workout for the Rockies down at Salt River Fields in Scottsdale, Arizona. Kris Bryant speaks to the media. Tomoyuki Sugano has some thoughts on Shohei Ohtani, his teammate with Japan in the World Baseball Classic, but now his foe in the National League West. Plenty more to talk about, including the weird and wild situation going on with the MiLB Players Association. Kyle Freeland, the players representative for Colorado, has some thoughts on that. But the biggest news to come out of Rockies camp on Tuesday was Kris Bryant, his health status, his thoughts, the update, the actual situation of what's going on with his degenerative back issue, saying ultimately that he wakes up every day in pain. And unfortunately, minor physical activity is all he can really do before the progress ceases, before it starts to give him issue. Jogging can give him some serious problems, and his body feels awful, like electricity. He said, it just feels like, quote, I'm being electrocuted in my whole body. It's not ideal. It's pretty miserable. Maybe this is a part of old age, even though I'm not even old, end quote. He's 34 years old, and that is nothing any human being should have to deal with. And that is just really awful. He even went so far as to say that anytime his feet hit the ground, he feels like he could fall over. So don't know if that's actually being dizzy or that's, again, just his body not being, or his legs not being able to keep up his body. So it just doesn't seem like there's any way, any possible way we're going to see Kris Bryant wearing a Colorado Rockies uniform in a game. And I phrased it that way because Warren Schaeffer spoke Tuesday morning about Kris Bryant and his status and how, the Rockies and the clubhouse, the organization, are still trying to support him mentally, because I imagine besides just the toll this is taking on his body physically, mentally, it can't be very easy. Even for healthy ball players, when their time in the spotlight is over, now they got to figure out, well, who am I? And that can be a hard transition for a lot of guys who've always just been top athletes and the greatest at their sport, their ability, whatever their hobby, whatever it may be. Now they are not. Now they are just a regular Joe like you or I, except, maybe they have a couple $1 million in the bank, tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank. So you figure those things out pretty quickly. But for Kris Bryant, that's a struggle right now. As he said in the past, picking his kids up is a difficult task for him. So as a guy who loves his family, has a large family, and wants to be around that family and do family things with his sons, this is really difficult for him to do that. He played only 11 games last year, 37 in 2024, and it's just not a pretty scene. He said to MLB.com, quote, I honestly try not to let myself get there, thinking about the rehab, thinking about not playing very much over the last 4 years with the Colorado Rockies. But he continued by saying, when you're going through it every single day, you just try to make it day to day. I think people out there with chronic pain, you don't want to think about so far in the future because you're trying to get through the day. So I haven't let myself get there. So that's obviously very difficult for Kris Bryant to have to deal with this. And as I mentioned earlier, Warren Schaeffer and the team, they want to support him. And so might we see Kris Bryant in a uniform, not playing, but in a uniform? I think he obviously could offer a lot. That's what Schaeffer said. When you're a rookie of the year, when you're an MVP, when you've won a World Series in a baseball town where there was a baseball drought on the north side of Chicago with the Cubs, there's a lot of history there. You've seen a lot of things. You should be able to offer a lot to the younger players on this roster. And whether or not that comes to fruition, whether or not the Rockies do want to keep him around, if they think that he can be that kind of player, that kind of leader that's in the background, remains to be seen. So far, it from what it sounds like, he got his physical on Tuesday. They'll put together a game plan, and then he's just going to go back to Las Vegas and try to continue to do some rehabbing. But it does seem as if the Rockies' top brass probably just don't want him around at all. And how much does that have to do with the fact that maybe he doesn't contribute a ton behind the scenes? I've seen him do a good job leading some of the younger players. Granted, this was when he was more active back in 2023, looking after some of the younger players like a Nolan Jones. When Nolan Jones was able to cross a certain milestone that Kris Bryant had challenged him to, he ended up giving Nolan Jones a Rolex watch for his efforts for achieving that goal. So, certainly financially, he can participate in plenty of the games and friendly competitions that these players have. But how much is he actually doing that? Is that something that, again, the Rockies think that he may want to do? How much does Kris Bryant want to be around the game? How much does he want to give back to the other players in the clubhouse? How much does he want to give back to the organization? That still remains to be seen. It's hard to think that you can't really contribute on the field, but you can still contribute off the field. That has a lot of value. How much does Kris Bryant want to do that? How much does he just really want to spend time with his family in a much more safer place like that, where he doesn't have to be reminded of what he can and can't do? That being said, every day he recognizes there are things he can't do physically just with his family because of the impact this has had on his body. So this is truly awful that this 34-year-old young man really has such a debilitating pain already. It's awful. It's awful that he's dealing with that, but still has 3 more years left, $81 million over the next 3 years. Just seems like even an impossibility to craft a scenario where the Rockies could pay down virtually the entirety of his contract, and then he can go play for his hometown Las Vegas A's in 2 years' time. That feels like an impossibility, especially with how he has described this injury to his back, this degenerative lumbar disc disease that he has. And it's not getting any better anytime soon. And so his career is over. Now, what does that mean for retirement? What does that mean for, giving money back to the Rockies? That's not happening. That shouldn't happen. That's not good for the Players Association. That's not good for the 1,200 players that play in the major leagues every single year. You don't want to set a precedence like that about giving money back for not performing or not being healthy. You just can't do that. It's unfortunate. So Kris Bryant and his health and the salary that he makes from the Colorado Rockies, the Rockies still have to pay that. They're going to get something back in insurance. Would they have more money if Kris Bryant wasn't on this roster and never signed that 7-year, $182 million contract that it really seemed like only Dick Monfort wanted? Yeah, the Rockies would be in a much better situation, having not spent that money on a player who is not going to contribute in any way. But that's not the reality that we live in. It's just not. So is what it is. $81 million over the next 3 years, which the Rockies are still going to be working on their infrastructure, still building up players. Whether he is on this roster or not, whether he is getting paid $81 million over the next 3 years or not, isn't really going to impact what Paul DePodesta, Josh Burns, Walker Monfort wants to do with this team. It really is not going to have a huge impact. The Rockies, for a very long period of time, and this is still true now, spend way more money on payroll than they do on anything going on behind the scenes. That's where the biggest investment is. And investment isn't even the right word, because just here's what we have to give to salary. Here's what most teams, here's the percentage, and this is how much we can feasibly spend. So be it. You save money. If Kris Bryant, if we wake up tomorrow morning and we live in a world in which Kris Bryant can give back $81 million, which he can't, but if he gives that back, the Rockies are not going to go and build some kind of facility in Venezuela to bring in the best international talents in. They're not going to build an academy over in Japan. They're not going to go hire away the best scouts over in the Pacific Rim to then bring over some great Japanese ball players. That's not where that $81 million is going to go. Some of it will go perhaps to some of those things, but it's not going to be what you think it is. So don't waste any more breath, any more energy on Kris Bryant, because it's just really unfortunate where he's at. Warren Schaeffer, during his morning presser, besides talking about Kris Bryant, discussed Cal Karros looking great in camp. He is up 20 pounds from the end of last season. He looked like, a young man that had moved through the minors fairly quickly. I think he deserved that opportunity to come up. It's just really unfortunate that he no longer has rookie eligibility now for 2026 and beyond. But Kyle Karros looking a lot better. One of the other videos that I got to see from the Rockies communication staff was Doug Bernier, who is outfield and base running coach working with the AAA type of guys, the Zach Veens, Drew Avens, Cole Carrig, Sterling Thompson. And I'll tell you what, Cole Carrig was rather impressive from what I saw. Really impressive with his knowledge on stealing bases, not getting picked off, getting proper leads. If you didn't know any better, you would have thought he was the most veteran player in that group, like a player coach. Like that's what Cole Carrig sounded like. So that was pretty impressive. And look, for stealing 53 bases in 2024 and 46 bases at Double-A last year, there's certainly something to suggest that Cole Carrig does know how to steal a base or two. Patrick Saunders talking with Tomoyuki Sugano about their friendly rivalry. Sugano, for the many years, 12 years over in NPB for Tomoyuki Sugano with the Yomiuri Giants. Now, not all of that was at the same time as Shohei Ohtani. Now, they were both first-round picks in 2012, but Ohtani, 2017, was his final year before he went to the Los Angeles Angels. And so they only ever faced each other one time back in 2015. And Ohtani was 2 for 3 with a double. Last year, Sugano's first in Major League Baseball, Dodgers-Orioles only clashed one time, as it is part of interleague play. And Shohei Ohtani had 2 at-bats, and he had 2 home runs against Tomoyuki Sugano. So I imagine that now with the Dodgers and Rockies playing 4 times a year and Sugano and Ohtani potentially facing off 4 times a year, this will be a really fun rivalry to keep an eye on. And maybe, during the World Baseball Classic, looking into that dugout or watching those clips of guys practicing on the backfields and saying, hey, they have a friendly rivalry. Is it just a rivalry? It's a little bit different because we've seen Ohtani and Yamamoto goofing around in previous World Baseball Classics. Then again, they weren't teammates back in 2023. I mean, maybe Ohtani knew that was where Yamamoto was going to end up, but a little different situation here. Herman Marquez, as I mentioned the other day, signs a 1-year deal with the San Diego Padres. We now know some of the details of his contract, thanks to Kevin Acee. $1 million for this season, so just a little bit more than the league minimum for the all-time strikeout leader in Colorado Rockies franchise history. Still a very young man who's just barely on the wrong side of 30. There is a mutual option for 2027. Not entirely clear how much that would be. I imagine in the $2.5, $3 million range. Nothing much, but he'll also be guaranteed $750,000 in a buyout. So he'll be guaranteed 1.75 for his time with the Padres, even in a worst case scenario. And performance bonuses this year could take him up to $3.25 million. That's less than what they are going to pay Griffin Canning to battle for one of the spots in the rotation. Walker Buehler also just signed a minor league deal with the San Diego Padres, which is pretty wild to think how the mighty have fallen. He made $18 million. You could say he made $21 million with the Boston Red Sox because there was a $3 million buyout that he also got for the beginning of this year. So he was guaranteed $21 million by the Boston Red Sox, and now he has a minor league deal with the San Diego Padres. Finished out 2025 really good in 3 games with the Phillies, like outstanding, but it's 3 games. He doesn't get a major league deal himself. Rockies finalize finalize their minor league coaching staff throughout their system. And I say sort of because at High A Spokane, they still have to figure out who their bench coach and their hitting coach will be. So not totally complete at this point. in the chat over on YouTube. If you're listening to this on the podcast side, go over to the YouTube channel. And even if you're catching this after the fact, you can leave a comment and I will get back to you. Luke saying, do you have any beat on any of the front office contract numbers? Could you get what's Burns's AAV? That's a great question. No, it's hardly known how much money front office members make. It's even more rare to know how much they make. A little bit less rare, but still can be difficult to find out how long a general manager, assistant general manager, how long they have on their contracts. It's also just something that's not discussed quite as much because they are usually longer term deals, right? Maybe 3, 4, 5 years at a time. But it's never discussed, how much money front office people make. I imagine if you are one of those people, you're aware of how well certain teams pay their front office, pay their coaching staff, things of that nature. But no, it's not known. I've never known the answer to that. Do some people know? Maybe, but it's good luck if you can find it out there because I've never seen it, haven't heard about that, haven't asked around about it exactly, but I think that's a great question. So the coaching staff, Pedro Lopez back for this 4th season with the Isotopes. Craig Bjornson joins the team as Albuquerque's pitching coach. He comes over from AAA Gwinnett in Atlanta's system where he was the bullpen coach there at the Gwinnett Stripers. So one of only a few coaches from outside the organization. Luis Lopez takes over for bench duties where he was the bench coach in Hartford last year. Matt Snyder is now the hitting coach in AAA. He served the same role for the high A Jersey Shore Blue Claws of the Philadelphia Phillies system. I mentioned last week, Robinson Cancel back as the AA manager. Michael Ryan is now the bench coach. He was the bench coach last year for Albuquerque. Jerry Sullivan joins the organization. He was a pitching coach last year in the West Coast League, which is a summer collegiate league in the Oregon, Washington State area, was the pitching coach for the Bend Elks. He's 38 years old. This will be his first job within professional baseball, or at least within the affiliated baseball. Zach Osborne back as the hitting coach for the Yard Goats in High Spokane while they await their bench coach and hitting coach. What happened to their hitting coach last year? Tom Soteris. He is now the manager. So Tom Soteris, if you want to look at some of the longest term or longest reigning coaches within the minor league system, Tom Soteris is up there. And Tom Soteris is a Jersey guy like myself. So really good to see him around. I told him he didn't have anything to worry about. I told him that Warren Schaeffer is more likely than not coming back. I don't think they're going to totally clean house in the minor leagues. They want some consistency. They want some turnover. And I thought, from everything I'd heard from people inside the organization and how great, his players speak of him and the results that he's had, I had no doubt that Soteris would be back now as a manager. So congratulations to Manager Dirt. Blaine Beatty back, his 29th season coaching, his 8th in the organization, will be the pitching coach. At Single A Grizzlies, Single A Fresno, Cesar Galvez, his 2nd season as the Grizzlies manager. Dave Keller back as the bench coach. Jeff Brown, 1st season as the pitching coach after serving as the director of baseball operations and player development at Seattle University recently. Jeff Brown was the guy that was at Bend Elks. I think I said it was Jerry Sullivan. That was incorrect. That was incorrect on my part. Greg Jones will be the hitting coach for the 2nd consecutive year. And it looks like the Arizona Complex League and the Dominican Summer League is pretty much the same general crew that they've been rolling out. And frankly, they've had a ton of success. So that definitely makes a lot of sense for them to have that. So that's the update on the coaching staff, the update on the MLB PA. The players union, not great right now, especially as we're less than a year away. I mean, gosh, we are 9.5 months from the current CBA ending and a potential lockout. And now the head of the Players Association, Tony Clark, unexpectedly resigned early on Tuesday morning. Surprise to a degree. I mean, he was being investigated in New York um, because of a company that he had co-founded with the NFL Players Association that may or may not have improperly granted himself some equity in that company. There's some claims of nepotism and other corruption and mismanagement. The nepotism stuff may stem from the fact that, he hired his sister-in-law, and it came out that they may have an inappropriate relationship. And this isn't, his wife's sister. It isn't his brother-in-law's wife. It's actually his brother's wife. So things not looking good right now for Tony Clark at the moment, and or the Players Association. Kyle Freeland, who is now the player representative for the Rockies after Austin Gomber had been so for the last few years since he had arrived following the Nolan Arenado trade, said of Clark's resignation, a little bit shocking. Quote, Tony's been in that position for quite some time. I woke up to the same news that you guys did. I don't have much information on it right now, but I'm sure later today when we all get together, we'll have more information on it. They did meet, and Brent Suter was there. You had Marcus Simeon as some of those guys, and they did not vote on any new leadership. So still waiting to hear exactly what's going to happen with that, how the Players Association is going to proceed in a critical year, a really critical year, with the owners really trying to clamp down on the Players Association. And I'll say this, I'll talk more about it next week, but I feel pretty good about the lockout. We may get one, but I don't know that we're going to lose all of 2027. I don't even know that we're going to lose most of 2027. I feel pretty good, and I'll let you know soon enough. While the Innocent asks, which affiliate would you think is furthest away from Denver? Also closest other than Albuquerque. So just in general, well, their furthest affiliate that they actually have is AA Hartford. And that's something that, I've talked about in the past. And it was something that I've got in my off-season notes, which is it the off-season still? I don't know. But I'll still talk about it. Could Colorado possibly change some of their affiliates? Because when they had somewhat of a minor league shuffle after 2020, and the teams were settling in for 10 years with their affiliates, I really thought the Wichita Wind Surge, that going to the Texas League for AA would have made a lot of sense. I think you could have stolen all away a lot of Royals fans that lived in Kansas. Now, how many baseball fans, how many sports fans, how many people live in Kansas that you're going to do that, right? But you could have certainly called up guys a lot more frequently from AA Wichita to the majors. It's not going to happen a lot, but that's something that could go down if you have a AA affiliate in Wichita. And then you just can't get any closer than Albuquerque. I mean, Wichita is almost the exact same distance from, or drive time, as Albuquerque is from Denver. Amarillo is also like in that 6.5 hour range. So maybe you go Amarillo Sod Poodles, but they're just, money making machines. So I think they are one of the top like minor league affiliates to have. It's going to make you some money. So that's going to be a hard one to pry away from where they're at. Yeah, I think I understand your question, Wild. I think I do. Hartford, it's just a weird one how that ended up working out. And it seems like they're never going to leave there, just like leaving Albuquerque seems like that would never happen. But it could if Colorado Springs comes back onto the map as a AAA affiliate, maybe even a AA. There's just nothing else further in the northwestern part of the Texas League. So I don't think Colorado Springs could ever get a team for AA Texas League. It would have to be AAA, and there's still a lot of issues that they need to work out. I've mentioned this. I've been talking about this for almost a decade now. When we do get expansion, we don't just get 2 new teams in the majors. We get how many fingers? 8. We get 8 new minor league teams as well. So that's 2 AAA, 2 AA, that could come with some shuffling. And perhaps Wichita is the Rockies AA affiliate. Perhaps a new team in Colorado Springs with a new stadium is now the AAA affiliate for the Rockies. Never say never. Wichita, also known as the Denver Bears. Yes. So no one really cares about like I don't want to say etymology, but the trajectory of minor league teams. I do, and you might as well, Wild. But like Major League Baseball, sure, you're following all that. Like the Milwaukee Brewers. Oh, actually, they were originally the Seattle Pilots for one season in 1969, and the Las Vegas A's. Well, they were in Oakland, and then before that they were in Kansas City. Before that, they were in Philadelphia. The timeline for the Denver Bears is actually, I don't know where they came from before they were in Denver. They might have originated from Denver, but Denver Bears to the Denver Zephyrs, still in Denver. They go down to New Orleans, then they become the New Orleans Baby Cakes, and then with some shuffling, New Orleans becomes Wichita, and then they go from being AAA to AA. That's where it goes. And then with the Colorado Springs Sky Sox, I was just thinking about this the other day. They were originally the Sacramento Solons. Then they went out to Hawaii and became the Hawaii Islanders. And then came to the Colorado Springs where they're the Sky Sox. And then it just got crazy with the Rocky Mountain vibes and going all over. I think the Sky Sox technically became the San Antonio Missions, who already existed, but they were a AA affiliate, and then they became a AAA one at that point. It doesn't really line up exactly, but you know your history, Wild. Good stuff there. The Rockies Insider with your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, talking about the opening day roster. I want to get your thoughts on that. If you're watching live on YouTube, let me know what you think. Or you can go ahead and comment in my DMs, reach out, social media, you name it. You can also do the same over on the YouTube channel, the Rockies Insider channel on YouTube. You can leave a comment. I will see that. Predicting the 2026 opening day roster. We've got a long way to go, and that's why I think this is such a fun activity with over a month to go, almost 6 weeks before opening day. So a lot can change, and that's where it gets really fun. It doesn't get fun if someone gets hurt, and that's why there's a change. But this is why it gets fun. And Friday, yes, we're talking game 1 of the Cactus League slate. Arizona versus Colorado, Diamondbacks versus Rockies. As always, at Salt River Fields since 2011, I believe, was that first year that they started playing against one another, as they share the facility, and that's been the tradition that they play one another the first game of the season. I think they typically play each other the first 2 games the last couple years, beginning of the spring training season, that is. And next week I'll talk a little bit more about some of the camp battles that you should keep an eye out for. We know about the 5th starter spot, maybe even the 4th starter, if you will, right? You've got the second base, third base situation. Is it Kyle Karros at third? Is it Ryan Ritter or Adiel Amador at second? But then where does Willie Castro fit into that scenario, right? There's a lot. The Tyler Freeman, is he going to be in the mix for second base, or is he going to be more in right field? Is he going to be more of a bench piece? Could the Rockies go with 3 catchers, with Hunter Goodman really being that true DH? And you've got Braxton Fulford, and then maybe Kyle McCann, or maybe Brett Sullivan, as both of those guys are signed to minor league deals. So a lot to talk about, even though I just did, but a lot more to talk about those spring battles. And you know who's not going to be at first base? And you may have already heard about this, but Dom Smith. He was one of those names that was floated out there as a possible player that the Rockies could have brought in to play first base. He's shown flashes at times. He only gets a minor league deal with Atlanta. And so you begin to understand that the Rockies have sat back. I think they're going to continue to sit back until something happens. And if they have to go with their guys, I don't want to say homegrown because most of them aren't, but if they have to go with the guys that are currently on their 40-man roster, I think they're going to be fine with that for the time being, as they wait for Charlie Condon, or as they wait for an even shorter period of time for TJ Rumfield. He could be that guy over at first base, but not ideal to platoon at first base. But if any team is going to have a left-right split over at first base, it's going to be the guy that helped craft Moneyball, and that's President Baseball Operations Paul DePodesta. So you very well could see Troy Johnston, Blaine Crim, and Edward Julian all splitting time in various forms over at first base. But a catcher, it's pretty simple. Right now it's Hunter Goodman and Braxton Fulford, and you hope that's how it goes down, because that means A, both those guys are healthy, and B, that the bench is strong enough that you're not thinking about carrying that third catcher. You're not thinking about McCann or Sullivan so you can DH Goodman. It also suggests, that after his first year as a professional catching full time, that Hunter Goodman's body rebounded and is going to continue to rebound. So, it might end up being that Braxton Fulford catches 60% of the time. He catches 3 of the 5 starters, and Goodman is starting for 2 of the 5. And then he is the DH essentially 2 of the other 3 days that he's not behind the plate, and you can keep him fresh. That's not a bad strategy. I don't think you're grinding Braxton Fulford down to a stump by any means, no. But it does allow you to keep Goodman sharp, which has a lot of value. And it does, show some of Fulford's abilities out there, getting his bat in the lineup, the fastest catcher in all of baseball. So that's very exciting. They're both healthy. The bench is really good. Again, this is just the chalk. This is how things are reading so far in the early going for this team. Let's get some of your predictions in the chat. McCarthy in left field, Doyle in center, Beck in right. I think you might flip those with Beck in left field, but maybe not. We'll find out. You like Freeman at third base, Tovar at short, Willie Castro at second base, Trey Johnston at first, Goodman catching, Mickey Moniak, the DH in the bench, Crim, Julian, Fulford, Ritter. I mean, that's pretty much the chalk. I don't know that Freeman's got the arm for third base, so you can go ahead and flip him and Willie Castro. Is Ryan Ritter going to be the third baseman some days? And then you're going to have Willie Castro over at second base. Could be. Crim is part of that first base platoon. I think that makes sense. Also seeing Mickey Moniak DH only in 2026. I don't think so, because you want to keep Hunter Goodman, his bat, in the lineup when he's not behind the plate. You want to refresh those legs just a little bit, those kneecaps just a little bit, but not lose his bat entirely. You can't afford to lose his bat. The depth of the Rockies has gotten a lot better, but it's about the middle of the lineup, the top of the order, the best bats being in the lineup as much as possible. And you have to have Goodman in the lineup. For that to happen, you got to have him as DH a lot. So when Goodman's behind the plate, Mickey Moniak will be your DH. But when he's not behind the plate and he is your DH, I mean, it's going to be Mickey Moniak. I think I said earlier this offseason that I predicted Hunter Goodman will have the most starts at DH this season. And that might only end up being 50 games, because it's going to be used as a sort of day off, a pseudo day off for everybody else, that you want to keep Brenton Doyle's bat in the lineup, Tovar's bat in the lineup, maybe if Willie Castro or Ryan Ritter's going out to short, although Tovar doesn't want to come out and just hit. He'd rather field and you DH for him. Michael Lorenzen is going to pitch, hit ninth, and the DH is going to be used for Tovar because Tovar wants to play defense. He'd rather play defense than just hit as the DH. But I think Goodman will end up with the most games started at DH, and then it's going to be everybody else getting a day off their feet, but keeping the bat in the lineup. How many at-bats in the chat? How many at-bats each are you giving Crim, Johnson, Julian before you want to see Rumfield? A lot of that's going to have to do with how much is Rumfield ready. Because Johnston can play corner outfield a little bit. And really, you're looking at almost a Michael Toglia 2.0. He's a little bit older, but we saw Toglia play some right field adequately. Good arm. but right field and first base. Edward Julian can also play second base. Let's not forget. I think that's probably a better position for him. And then you've got spots. So Krim is really the odd man out because he doesn't have that kind of flexibility. And that is something that Warren Schaeffer has talked about a lot so far this spring. He's excited about the flexibility of this roster. There's a lot of potential to mix and match with players who can play multiple positions. And Schaeffer also has a lot of lefty, righty hitters. Willie Castro is a switch hitter. So right there, that's 2 for 1. He can play anywhere that you need. He's never played first base, I don't think. He's never caught in a game. But he probably is the third. He's probably the emergency catcher. Like that's just how it goes. But a lot of flexibility is going to allow Warren Schaeffer to get that much more out of this Rockies team. It wouldn't be surprising at the end of the season, their expected win-loss record is a lot lower than their actual win-loss record. Like the Rockies are going to win probably 5 more games than you would expect looking at their runs allowed and their runs scored because of the placement of all these flexible players. And the sum of the parts are going to be worth more than the actual individual players. So being able to mix and match provides a lot of flexibility and a much greater potential to win ball games, especially late, especially when Warren Schaeffer continues to say, and I think this is true for better or worse, but the bullpen is the strongest part of this team right now. That's how he feels. And I think I would agree. I don't think it's by a lot, but I think the bullpen is probably the strongest part. So, if you go back to the days of the Blake Street Bombers, which this team is not, it's very far from that. But if you go back to the Blake Street Bombers, they believed 2 things. One, that despite the amount of runs that their starting pitching might give up, they can still get those runs back late in the game, and that their strong bullpen could keep the other team at bay. Now, it might not go exactly like that, but if the Rockies can chip away late in ball games and their bullpen can hold on to, the score and keep it where it's at, then the Rockies are going to win that many more games than you would expect, given the fact that they've given up this many runs on the season, and they've only scored this many runs. That's where the projected win-loss record, the Pythag win-loss record, comes from. So I think they'll probably end up winning 5 extra games through all of these various platoons. And Blaine Crim, going back to your question, if Blaine Crim is only going to be able to play first base, that's going to leave him as the odd man out. And, the Rockies could very well think that he is a player that could go unclaimed on waivers and he could stay within the organization. In the chat, wasn't Stallings considered the slowest or close to slowest catcher in Major League Baseball? He was. Jacob Stallings was so slow. How slow was he? He was so slow last year and through much of his career that he did just accept a job in the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball operations department. So good for him. Jacob Stallings, great baseball mind. He is now back with the Pirates, working in their front office in the baseball operations department. So that's really cool. That's good for him to see that. Also in the chat, how many games Moniak going to get in the field? Let's put that at 65. That's where that one feels like. Colorado Sports Talk. Good to see you, buddy. Are you going to Arizona? Yes. Middle of March is when I'll be down there. Going to wait for some of these camp battles to play out just a little bit to see where the Rockies are at and get a much better grip on whether or not they can only lose 99 games or less, because there's a chance of that. And we're going to talk a lot about that at the beginning of the season or in spring training. And once the season begins, it's going to be a lot harder to think about that because they've got a very tough schedule in April. So they're going to get off to a bad start, but I think winning 63 games or more, 63 games doesn't mean anything, right? But that's how many wins you would have if you only, quote unquote, lost 99 games. So 63 wins is going to be on the table, and I'll get a much better feel for this team, this roster, the potential of these players later on in spring than right now, which is typically when I like to go down, right when the games start up, a little bit before that, next month is when I'll be there. Wild saying in the chat, I'm skipping Arizona for WBC in Houston. I like that. Last WBC in 2023, I had an opportunity to go down there, and it would have been really tight. And I just told myself, Patrick, you'll have more opportunities to go cover the World Baseball Classic because you'll already be there in Arizona. Well, guess what, Patrick? 2026, they're not in Arizona. So good for you for going down there to check that out. So let's get back to this projected lineup. First base, I think Blaine Crim is going to be the right-handed bat. And then from the left-handed side, I think it's going to be Troy Johnston. And then Edward Julian is going to be splitting time with Tyler Freeman at second base as the left-handed hitting component to Tyler Freeman at right on the right-hand side. And then Julian's also going to play a little bit of first base as well. I don't think he's going to get as many reps over at first base than he will at second base. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Tyler Freeman because his value as a corner outfielder pales into comparison as what he could be at second base, putting the ball in play. We know Tovar is going to be there at short. Willie Castro, we know, is going to be there on the bench. And, that's one more bench spot that's out there. Is it going to be Kyle Karros? Is it going to be Ryan Ritter? Or could it be Ariel Amador? I still think there's something there with Ariel Amador. Will he even be as effective as Ryan Ritter will be or Kyle Karros in their career? Maybe not. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. Like, someone like a Yanquiel Fernandez, who, after being designated for assignment, you might not have seen the follow-up on that, but no one claimed him off waivers. So Yanquiel Fernandez now in AAA with the New York Yankees. But Kyle Karros, it's hard to say who is going to get that spot. I think Ryan Ritter, because of what he was able to do last year, even in a short-term role, I thought handled himself really well. There just becomes a question of, who is it most important to get regular everyday at-bats in AAA? Is it more important for Ariel Amador to do that, or Kyle Karros, or Ryan Ritter? Who would benefit the most from going back down to AAA? Because if you're not playing regularly, like if Ryan Ritter is truly going to be on the bench, I don't know how much that really helps him out, unless you're just saying, yeah, you know what? He's the Pat Valaika, where he was never truly a starter in the majors, came up off the bench, but was an impact player off of the bench and contributed. There's that potential. In the outfield, we know the four guys in Jordan Beck, Bretton Doyle, Jake McCarthy, who's going to be out there regularly, and Mickey Moniak, who will be the DH when you're looking at that threesome right there. Where it really gets interesting, and this isn't so much of a camp battle as it is just part of the story for this season, is the fact that in AAA, there's going to be no less than 4 top prospects for the Rockies kicking around, knocking on the door to Denver saying, can we come up and play regularly? We would like to show what we can do. Zach Veen probably leads that list because he's the only one who's debuted just yet. Sterling Thompson just added to the 40-man roster. He's making some noise. Doesn't really have a true position, but he can play the corners. He's going to have to knock the loudest, I think. But then you've got Jared Thomas from the 2024 draft with Charlie Condon. And you've got, arguably the best outfield prospect in the system in Cole Carrick. And the nearly 100 stolen bases combined over the last 2 years. It's 99. But still, you've got those guys knocking on the door. And you've got other teams potentially interested in Bretton Doyle's services and his Gold Glove abilities in center. Almost a Gold Glove caliber. No, it's just he's a Gold Glover. The last 2 years, the numbers were really strong last year as well. Nobody ran on him, so didn't get the opportunities to throw players out at home or third base, trying to take the extra bag or what have you. And maybe even Jake Carthy, you're able to extract some value there. Or Mickey Moniak. This feels like for the first time that the Rockies have trade chips that you're not excited for the Rockies to trade away, but you're excited at the potential of, hey, what could you really get for this guy? What could you do if you were someone who ran the Rockies, who had good relationships with other teams and wasn't afraid of taking some risks, wasn't afraid of the backlash that you might get from, oh, you're trading this guy? Of course, that's what the Rockies do. They're a minor league team for all the other 29 clubs in MLB. They're trying to build something. And to build something, it may require making some trades of popular players. I said it before that tanking was the one strategy that the Rockies had never tried. And this was in and around the time when they traded Nolan Arenado, and it felt like, what's the point? Right? What is the point now when you're trading a franchise player like Nolan Arenado and you're not going to bring back John Gray, you're not going to bring back Trevor Story? What's the point? And then for all of those people that I think were really worried that maybe the Rockies would attempt tanking and trade away all their best assets, and how frustrating and difficult that could be following the Rockies for a couple years, they said, well, hold on. You want to make sure you tank appropriately, because if you don't, I mean, it's not going to work, right? If you don't tank the right way, maybe you only get one playoff appearance or two, or you don't win a World Series, or you don't make a deep run into the postseason. And I think that's a fair point. But here we are now, 4 full seasons. No, 5 full seasons after the Nolan Arenado trade. And the Rockies are no better off than if they would have tanked. Even if they would have tanked with Bill Schmidt in charge or anyone else running the ship, and you didn't trust that they were going to tank appropriately, would the Rockies still have lost 119 games last year? Probably not, because they would have extracted value from their assets, which they didn't do. Now, granted, they probably still would have averaged, 108 losses over 3 seasons, but they wouldn't have had to restart all over again like they're doing now in 2026. So you see Brenton Doyle, you see Jake McCarthy, who McCarthy has only just arrived, but still you look at them as players that could end up bringing back something of significance to an organization that needs players of significance. That's kind of exciting. That's kind of exciting to think that maybe the Rockies are the first one to get on the board in the middle of June, when teams are looking to do a deal. Someone gets hurt from a contender and the Rockies jump in immediately. They poke their head in the door and go, hey, we've got so-and-so. It's going to cost you, but we'll move this early in the year. I know the kids just got out of school and they're starting to come to ball games, and we're selling a couple of jerseys of this player, but we're trying to win a championship here. We're trying to rebuild something. What do you have to offer? It's exciting to think that the Rockies could be at the forefront of a rebuild rather than just letting a rebuild happen to them, which is where they're at right now. Looking at the chat, Rockies win 49 and lose 100. And don't play 13 games? You're bearing the lead there. That's exciting to think. It's not exciting to think, but that's interesting to think. How about the starting rotation? I mean, we know Kyle Freeland, Michael Lorenz, and Tomoyuki Sugano are going to be there. Jose Quintana. Those are your 4 guys right there. And then the number 5 spot, I said it, I think at the beginning of this week, but Ryan Feltner, I think, has the edge over Chase Dollander, who could benefit from a little bit more seasoning. Tanner Gordon, who was essentially their ace in many ways. I really think it was Kyle Freeland at the end of the adjustments. But Tanner Gordon got, plenty of credit, plenty of accolades. He won that start against Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers in a 4-game series that they were able to split. So that's something. But I think Dollander will probably start the year in AAA. And He'll get a little bit more seasoning, and the next time you see him, he'll be that much more ready. Now, the bullpen is the last and final area to talk about. And what I find interesting with the bullpen that's a little bit different this year than last year, although it's still a little bit true. Last year, it felt like everybody that they had in the bullpen had options that could go back and forth, and it allowed you to stay really fresh. And some guys, they might have been fresh, but they weren't getting the job done. So you didn't see a ton of them, right? Like a Luis Peralta. You didn't see him as much as you thought you were probably going to. But you don't have a ton of players right now with flexibility, with options. You've got 3 options each for Victor Vodnik and Seth Halverson, and if both those guys are healthy, which you want them to be, you hope that they are, they're not going to start the year in AAA. That's your 8th and 9th inning guy. That's not the end, right? So those guys will not get optioned. They're not helping your depth, so to speak. I don't want to say they're not, but their contract situation doesn't necessarily help them. You've got 1 option each for Juan Mejia and Brennan Bernardino. And Mejia and Bernardino, you look at their numbers from last year, you say, oh, those are 2 of the better guys in the Rockies bullpen. They shouldn't go down. And yeah, maybe they shouldn't. But if they don't get it done in spring training and they've got a couple things that they need to work on, that's a wonderful thing. You start them in AAA, and that means there's going to be 1 or 2 other players that take their spot and hopefully can pitch that much better in the majors, while Mejia and Bernardino get their poop in a group, and then they come back up and contribute when someone gets hurt or when someone's ineffective. So it's really Mejia and Bernardino because Senzatella doesn't have any more options. Then again, you designate him for assignment, nobody is going to claim him on waivers. I believe he also has the rights to opt into free agency. So he may not want to come back. So that doesn't exactly help your depth. RJ Pettit was a Rule 5 draft pick. And if he doesn't make your team, then you can't have him. That's that. You don't have the option of keeping that many extra relievers. If he's on the IL versus 60-day IL, doesn't necessarily matter, but you could get creative just a little bit. Keegan Thompson, who you currently might pencil in for a spot in the bullpen, doesn't have any options. So there just aren't a ton of options. Doesn't mean they can't find that way with IL spots, somebody starting on the IL, and you find a way for Jaden Hill to make a spot, which I think the team likes him a lot. So I would tend to think that perhaps, Jaden Hill gets a spot on the roster over Keegan Thompson. But if you go that way, is Keegan Thompson going to play ball? Are you going to lose him if you designate him for assignment? If he's not very good in spring, then that's a non-issue. Nobody's going to scoop him up. But if 1 or 2 of these relievers are on the IL, Jaden Hill is a slam dunk there. Same for Zach Agnos, who, if he's healthy, he's going to be amongst their best. There's Luis Peralta, and there's Wellington Herrera, who just got added to the 40-man roster and looking to make his major league debut. So there's depth there in the bullpen, no doubt about it. I think John Brebbia also has a decent shot at making the opening day roster. How does that work out with what they currently have with, again, just Mejia and Bernardino as players? Reasonably, you could think about optioning to the minors to start the season, but even then, Bernardino is your only left-handed option. So that's not happening. So if you go from roster resource and what they've got, Juan Mejia is the only guy you can sub out. And you can only sub in either Wellington Herrera, Jaden Hill, Zach Agnos, or Luis Peralta. Someone will get hurt, unfortunately. Someone will clear waivers because they were really bad in spring, and they'll stick around. And the Rockies will still be able to maintain a certain level of depth. In the chat, Ryan Feltner at Rockies Fest looked like he was really pumped to be back in the mix. Yeah, he worked hard this offseason. So I think he's going to be in a great spot too, as more likely than not the number 5 starter. Again, it doesn't really matter at a certain point in the season because there's just that turnover. It's just that first run through. But as the number 5 starter, he's going to be facing lesser opposition, and that could help him out a lot and secure a few more pitcher wins. Not that it means anything, but even still, He looks great, and I think if he's healthy, he's going to have a spot in that rotation. He's going to have that 5th spot, but that's a highly contested spot right now for the Rockies, the number 5 spot. I'll talk about that and so much more with the camp battles next week. Plenty more of the Rockies Insider, and make sure you go over to the channel because I've got exclusive video that you're not going to see anywhere else. Players, interviews, guys doing their thing. Tomoyuki Sugano, do you want to see what his pitch mix looks like a little bit? What are his mechanics like? I've got video of that. Hunter Goodman talking about Kenneth Walker, the 3rd Super Bowl MVP for the Seattle Seahawks. They played high school football together. That's insane. So a lot of really good content over there. Please make sure you check that out. At Patrick D. Lyons on X, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB on TikTok and Blue Sky, and the Rockies Insider channel over on YouTube. Appreciate you dropping by and giving me some wonderful momentum. But momentum, as you know, is only as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then.